Relationships are an essential part of our lives, and we get into relationships with others because we want to feel loved and experience a sense of belonging. We want to be around people with similar shared experiences, and we intend to build our futures together. But relationships can go from being a healthy and a loving one to becoming a toxic, controlling, and an abusive one. This can negatively impact our psychological health and well-being and potentially cause significant harm to individuals involved. This episode would list some signs of an abusive relationship, discuss how we can support someone in an abusive relationship within reason, and finally, explain the importance of getting in touch with specialist support organizations. Hi there, my name is Ayo from the Talking Hub, and we are going to explore some signs of an abusive relationship. An abusive relationship is a pattern of behavior where one partner seeks to gain and maintain power and control over the other through various forms of abuse, including physical, emotional, psychological, sexual, and financial abuse. These behaviors are often repeated and can escalate over time, leaving us feeling trapped, helpless, and isolated. Abuse can happen to anyone, regardless of their age, background, gender identity, sex, religion, sexual orientation, or ethnicity. Abusers make deliberate choices to assert dominance and control over their partners, and the various tactics used to make sure that this happens could be intimidation, emotional abuse, isolation, deliberate denials, the use of privilege, excessive blaming, and economic abuse. Some of the signs of an abusive relationship could be physical abuse. This could involve any form of physical violence, such as slapping, hitting, pushing, or choking. Another sign could be the use of intimidation or threats to exert authority and instill fear in us. For instance, an abuser could strike objects or things around them when they are in a rage, or they could threaten to hurt themselves just to make sure that we feel guilty and not leave the relationship. One other sign could be a move by the abuser to isolate us from our friends, family members, and support systems. Now, these actions can begin to make us start becoming totally dependent on the abuser. Some simple instances could be abusive partners discouraging us from attending family gatherings, social events, or preventing family members or friends from coming down to visit us at home. Another sign of an abusive relationship could be the presence of a controlling behavior. In this instance, abusers can try to control and have so much influence on our actions, movements, and even decisions. This could also extend to who we see, what we wear, or who we talk to on the phone. The goal of abuse is to always look for ways to limit our social interaction or communication. One other sign could be the use of emotional abuse in the relationship. Abusers tend to manipulate, humiliate, and criticize us just to undermine our self-worth and make us feel insignificant. For instance, an abuser might constantly mock our appearance or abilities, causing us to feel inadequate, withdrawn, and have a sense of low self-esteem. And finally, one other sign of an abusive relationship could be the excessive blaming and denial that the abuse is happening in the relationship. Abusers tend to minimize the abuse, deny it ever happened, or shift blame elsewhere, making us feel responsible for the abuse occurring in the relationship. For instance, an abuser might say that they were provoked by our actions and that the impact of the abuse on us isn't so serious, so we need to get on with life. Abusive relationships can have some devastating effects on our physical, emotional, and psychological well-being, but it would be really helpful if we could acknowledge some of the following truths. And they are: abuse is a crime. There is absolutely no excuse for domestic or emotional abuse. No one deserves to be abused at all. There is no reason to feel ashamed when seeking specialist support. We should never be blamed for the abuse in a relationship because it's not our fault. And finally, being abusive is a choice made by the abuser, and they're responsible for all their actions. So I mentioned a few minutes ago that abusive relationships have a negative impact on our physical, emotional, and psychological well-being. And this happens because we tend to experience high levels of anxiety, fear, and depression due to the constant stress and frustration from being in an abusive relationship. We might also develop a low self-esteem and self-worth due to constant criticisms, victim blaming, and emotional abuse. This makes us feel withdrawn and puts us in a position where we start believing the abuser's insults and blame ourselves for the abuse in the relationship. One other psychological impact is the possibility of turning to drugs, alcohol, or self-harming as a way of coping with the frustrations, anxiety, and distress caused from being in an abusive relationship. Abusive relationships also takes a toll on our physical health, leading to conditions like panic attacks, chronic pains, and possibly frequent headaches. And finally, we could experience loneliness due to alienation and a lack of interaction or association with friends, family members, and specialist professionals. So we've been able to describe an abusive relationship, list the signs of an abusive relationship, talk about its impact on our psychological health and well-being. Let's now discuss some ways to help or provide support to someone in an abusive relationship. Some simple ways to get help if we're in an abusive relationship could be trying to reach out to trusted friends, family members, or specialist professionals. We can also contact specialist support helplines for assistance if it's safe and practical to do so. We can also create a safety plan or come up with strategies for staying safe during or after leaving the relationship. We could also identify safe places to go, pack emergency bags containing essential items like passports, documents, and toiletries. We could also keep records of abusive incidents, including dates, times, and injuries or property damage. This could be used as evidence for obtaining protective orders or building a legal case. It may seem like a difficult step to take, but please remember that there is support available, and if you're in the United Kingdom, you can call the 24-hour National Domestic Abuse Helpline managed by Refuge Charity on 0808 2000 247, the Men's Advice Line on 0808 8010 327. You can also engage with the specialist live chat service run by Women's Aid. Visit womensaid.org.uk. You could also call Mankind Initiative on 0808 8001 170 or visit domesticviolenceuk.org to search for more specialist support organisations using their signposting directory. Now, it takes a lot of courage to talk about an abusive relationship with others, so we must recognise that someone stepping forward to do this with us shows bravery, particularly when we consider societal stereotypes associated with abusive relationships. We must also learn to respect their boundaries and be non-judgmental in our approach. Some of the following points could help us when trying to provide support to others. We should endeavor to create safe spaces for talking and listening without the fear of being judged. These safe spaces should be free from distractions, be very comfortable, and make the individual feel very relaxed and express themselves freely. We should avoid being judgmental, dismissive, and not believing the stories that we hear, because it takes a lot of courage to come forward. We must also prioritize their safety and not pressurize them into leaving the relationship before they are ready, because this can sometimes be a complex and dangerous process. We should always reassure and remind them that the abuse is not their fault. We should educate ourselves on the issues of domestic and emotional abuse, because understanding the complexities of abusive relationships can help us provide better support to others. Abuse is all about power and control, and we need to make sure that we are not doing the same by taking the situation out of their hands or making decisions for them. It's also important to let them know that there are specialist support organizations and professionals available to them whenever they choose to reach out. We must not judge them for making their own decisions not to leave immediately, because there might be so many contributing factors to this view. However, if we have reason to believe that someone is in immediate danger, then we should call the police or encourage them to call if they're able to do so. We must understand that there are so many barriers to leaving an abusive relationship, and this could be cultural, financial, societal, and personal factors. It is a big decision which can lead to further abuse, so they make their own decisions whenever they are ready. We could offer to keep some vital documents or go with them to the hospital if there has been physical abuse. We could also report an assault to the police if they give us the permission to do so. We should always use supportive language and reassure them that they are not alone. And finally, we should always offer practical support and always signpost them to specialist support organizations. For instance, in the United Kingdom, we have Refuge Charity, Women's Aid, the Men's Advice Line, Mindkind, and Gallup, just to mention a few. So here's a quick review of what we've discussed on the signs of an abusive relationship, its impact on our psychological health, and how to support someone in an abusive relationship. We've been able to establish that the abuse is not our fault, and it's all about the abuser trying to exert power and control over us as individuals. We've also been able to list some signs of an abusive relationship, which could be physical abuse, controlling behaviors, and isolation. We also know that abusive relationships can have an impact on our psychological health and well-being, and it's important to get help, speak to someone, and reach out to specialist support services, because specialist professionals understand the complexities of an abusive relationship and can provide us with the required level of specialist support. Specialist support services create avenues for us to connect with other survivors and build a sense of community. Specialist support services provide access to resources such as safe housing, financial assistance, and legal advocacy. And finally, specialist support services develop strategies for helping us rebuild our self-esteem, setting healthy boundaries, and creating a life free from abuse. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the Talking Hub, and you can also listen to or download this episode on Spotify, Google, or Apple Podcast. Thank you.